welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. National Park Service Incident Report # 2024-1107 Reporting Officer Alaric Hayes, Archaeological Specialist. Date: November 7th, 2024. Location: Blue Ridge Section. Mile marker 847.3. Incident summary: this morning's routine trail inspection revealed unprecedented anomalies along the historic Cherokee Path connector. At approximately 0630 hours, I discovered what appeared to be fresh carvings on weathered trail markers dating back to the 1930s Civilian Conservation Corps installations. The symbols don't match any known Cherokee syllabary or European settler markings from our archaeological database. Geometric patterns, spirals, and interconnected lines form complex designs that seem to follow some deliberate system. What concerns me most, and I'm documenting this despite how it sounds, is that these carvings weren't there during last week's inspection. I've walked these trails for 8 years. I know every blaze, every marker, every route that catches hikers' boots. These symbols are new, but that's not the strangest part. At 1847 hours, while completing my evening documentation, the carvings began to emit a faint phosphorescent glow. Not bioluminescence. I've seen foxfire and rotting wood plenty of times. This was different, deliberate. The light pulsed in slow, rhythmic waves, starting from the deepest carved lines and spreading outward like veins filling with luminous blood. I attempted to photograph the phenomenon, but my camera malfunctioned. The digital display showed static whenever I pointed it toward the glowing symbols. My emergency radio experienced similar interference. Bursts of what sounded almost like whispered chanting beneath the white noise. Witness statements: none available. I was alone on the trail as per standard evening inspection protocol. 17 trail markers affected along a 2.3-mile stretch. Carvings appear professionally executed, consistent depth and style. No tool marks or debris suggesting recent work. Surrounding bark and stone show no damage typical of fresh carving. Temperature: 47 degrees Fahrenheit. No unusual weather conditions. However, I noted an absence of typical evening wildlife sounds during the luminescent phase. No insects, no bird calls, no rustling of nocturnal animals. The forest fell completely silent except for a low humming that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. Recommended actions: immediate survey of adjacent trail sections, consultation with University Folklore Department, installation of trail cameras at affected markers, temporary closure consideration if phenomenon continues. My grandmother used to tell stories about these mountains. Cherokee legends passed down through her mother's line, warnings about the sleeping mountain, and signs that appeared when ancient things stirred beneath the earth. She always said the mountain had veins that carried more than water. Standing there tonight, watching those symbols pulse with impossible light, I remembered her words. When the mountain's veins glow, boy, that's when you know the sleeper stirs. I'm probably reading too much into childhood stories. Stress from the job, maybe, but I can't shake the feeling that something fundamental changed on this mountain today. Something that's been waiting a very long time to wake up. The locals have a saying, "The mountain remembers everything." I'm starting to think they're right. My brother Cale is guiding a group through the north section tomorrow. I need to warn him to stay clear of the affected area until we understand what we're dealing with. Whatever carved these symbols did it for a reason, and I have the sinking feeling that reason involves more than simple vandalism. Status: investigation ongoing. Classification: unexplained phenomena. Requires immediate follow-up. Officer's note: this report documents events as observed. I stand by every detail recorded above. regardless of how it may appear to reviewing authorities. Something is happening on this mountain, and we need to take it seriously before it escalates beyond our ability to contain. End report. National Park Service, Priority Incident Report, hashtag 2024-1109AH. Reporting Officer, Alaric Hayes, Archaeological Specialist. Date, November 9th, 2024. Location, multiple trail sections. See attached map. Incident summary. 3 hikers reported missing as of 1,400 hours. Last confirmed sighting, November 8th, near mile marker 849.1, approximately 1.8 miles from the initial symbol discovery site. Missing persons are Jennifer Walsh, 24, Marcus Chen, 26, and David Rodriguez, 22. All experienced hikers from Virginia Tech. The situation has escalated beyond my initial assessment. The glowing symbols have spread. Missing persons details. Group departed Springer Mountain parking area at 0800 hours on November 8th. Planned overnight camping at designated site 12A. Failed to check in via satellite messenger at scheduled 1800 hours interval. Vehicle remains at trailhead. Personal effects undisturbed. Last communication received at 1,347 hours via text message from Jennifer Walsh's phone. Trail markers are breathing. Something wrong here. Ground moving. Cellular towers show no additional pings from any of the 3 devices after 1350 hours. Since my initial report, the symbol network has grown. Trail cameras installed at original sites captured the following sequence. November 8th, 0300 hours. Original symbols pulse brighter. November 8th, 0315 hours. New symbols appear on previously unmarked trees and rocks. November 8th, 0330 hours. Light pattern changes from random pulsing to synchronized waves. November 8th, 0345 hours. All cameras experience simultaneous malfunction. The synchronized pulsing follows a clear directional pattern, flowing like luminous blood through veins toward the mountain's peak. Each pulse cycle lasts exactly 7.3 seconds. The mathematical precision is unsettling. Witness statement, Cale Hayes, hiking guide. I brought my group through the north section yesterday morning. Like Alaric asked me to avoid the main trail, but we could see the glow even from 2 miles away. My hikers kept asking what it was. Some kind of art installation, they figured. I told them I didn't know. Around noon, we heard this humming. Deep, like it was coming from inside the mountain itself. My compass started spinning. GPS went haywire. The birds all flew away at once. I've never seen anything like it. Whole flocks just gone. One of my clients, this geology professor from Emory, she got real quiet. Started talking about subsurface vibrations and tectonic activity. But this wasn't geological, Alaric. This was something else. The missing hikers, I passed them on the trail around 1,300 hours. They were heading toward the glowing sections despite the warning signs. The girl, Jennifer, she looked, I don't know how to describe it, like she was sleepwalking, like something was calling her. I should have stopped them. God, I should have stopped them. Search teams located the missing hikers' campsite at 1,630 hours. Tents remain intact, sleeping bags undisturbed, but no sign of the individuals. Food and water supplies untouched, suggesting they left voluntarily in the middle of the night. Most disturbing discovery, 3 sets of footprints leading directly toward the brightest concentration of symbols. Tracks show no signs of struggle or coercion. Spacing between footsteps becomes increasingly irregular closer to the symbol sites, as if the walker's gait was affected by proximity to the phenomenon. Footprints terminate at mile marker 850.7, where the largest symbol cluster has appeared. Ground shows evidence of recent excavation, not by tools, but as if something had pushed up from beneath. Soil temperature 15 degrees above normal in affected areas. Electromagnetic readings show persistent anomalies. Local wildlife completely absent in 3-mile radius. Vegetation shows accelerated decay near symbol sites. Underground acoustic monitoring detects rhythmic vibrations at 0.7 Hz frequency. My brother's description of the missing hiker's behavior matches stories our grandmother told. She spoke of people who heard the mountains call during certain times. They would walk into the deep woods and never return. I used to think they were just cautionary tales about getting lost. Now I'm wondering if there was truth in those old warnings. Emergency protocols activated. All trails within 5-mile radius closed to public access. Search and rescue teams deployed with strict buddy system. State police and FBI missing persons unit notified. Request submitted for geological survey team. Local media advised of gas leak investigation as cover story. The humming cale described, "I've been hearing it too. The strongest at night around 0300 hours, coinciding with the symbol pulses. It doesn't sound random. There's a pattern, almost like it's trying to communicate something. I found myself walking toward the symbols twice yesterday, caught myself both times. There's a pull to them, subtle but persistent, like a song you can't get out of your head, except you feel it in your bones instead of hearing it." The missing hiker's final text keeps haunting me. "Trail markers are breathing. Standing here now, watching the symbols pulse in perfect synchronization, I understand what she meant. The mountain isn't just marked with these symbols. It's alive with them, and it's getting stronger." Status: search ongoing, extreme caution advised. Classification: missing persons with unexplained phenomena, requesting additional resources. Officer's note: 3 people are missing, and the situation is deteriorating rapidly. Whatever these symbols are, they're not finished with us yet. I fear we're dealing with something far beyond normal Park Service protocols. End report. National Park Service. Classified Incident Report # 2024-1111-AH. Reporting Officer: Alaric Hayes, Archaeological Specialist. Date: November 11th, 2024. Location: Park Service Field Office, Conference Room B. Incident Summary: Forest Service Special Agent Dorian McKenzie arrived at 0800 hours for historical consultation regarding the symbol phenomenon. His expertise in pre-Columbian archaeological sites was specifically requested by Regional Command, though I don't recall making such a request. Agent McKenzie's knowledge of the symbols is extensive. Disturbingly so. Agent McKenzie's briefing. Classification: restricted access. Agent McKenzie presented detailed documentation of similar symbol networks discovered at 7 other Appalachian locations over the past decade. Locations include Smoky Mountains, Tennessee, 2019; George Washington National Forest, Virginia, 2020; Monongahela National Forest, West Virginia, 2021; Cherokee National Forest, North Carolina, 2022. In each case, symbols appeared suddenly, exhibited luminescent properties, and were associated with missing persons reports. All sites were subsequently classified and access restricted under environmental hazard protocols. What Agent McKenzie didn't explain: why this information wasn't shared with local archaeological teams, and why each site was sealed rather than studied. Symbol network analysis. Using ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic scanning equipment McKenzie's team brought, we've mapped the complete symbol network. The discovery is staggering. The symbols aren't random markings. They form a vast geometric pattern spanning 47 square miles of mountainside. The network follows precise mathematical proportions, each symbol positioned according to some underlying structure that extends deep beneath the mountain. Most unsettling, the pattern isn't complete yet. Only 73% of the projected symbol sites are currently active. The remaining positions show evidence of carved foundations, waiting to be activated. Agent McKenzie: these symbols represent a pre-Columbian ritual system, Mr. Hayes. Likely Cherokee or earlier indigenous practices related to seasonal ceremonies. The luminescence is caused by naturally occurring phosphorescent minerals activated by specific atmospheric conditions. His explanation was smooth, professional, and completely inadequate. Natural phosphorescence doesn't pulse in mathematical sequences. Atmospheric conditions don't cause people to walk into the wilderness and vanish. When I pressed him about the missing hikers, his demeanor shifted. Missing persons are always tragic, but the wilderness claims people every year. We can't assume correlation implies causation. The important thing is controlling public access until the atmospheric conditions stabilize. Agent Mackenzie knew too much about the symbols before examining them. During our field survey, he identified specific symbol types and their traditional meanings without consulting any reference materials. When I asked about his sources, he mentioned specialized training in indigenous iconography, but provided no documentation. More concerning, he seemed to anticipate where new symbols would appear. At Site 7, he directed his team to scan a blank tree trunk. 20 minutes later, symbols began manifesting at that exact location. His equipment readings showed he was monitoring the 0.7 Hz underground frequency I discovered, but he claimed it was standard geological surveying. When I mentioned the frequency specifically, he went very still. Agent Mackenzie has implemented immediate restrictions. All symbol sites now classified as hazardous archaeological zones. Local law enforcement barred from affected areas. My archaeological team reassigned to administrative duties. All documentation to be forwarded to Forest Service custody. Media contact strictly prohibited. He assured me this was standard procedure for sensitive historical sites. But standard procedure doesn't involve armed security teams, and it doesn't explain why his archaeological equipment includes military-grade communication arrays. Something about Agent Mackenzie feels wrong. His knowledge is too specific, his preparations too thorough. It's as if he was expecting this to happen. When I mentioned my grandmother's Cherokee legends about the Sleeping Mountain, his reaction was telling. For just a moment, his professional mask slipped. He looked afraid. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Mr. Hayes. Some stories are warnings. Perhaps it's time you remembered that. How does he know about my grandmother? Current status: missing hikers still not located. 72 hours overdue. Symbol network now covering 47 square miles. 27% of projected sites remain inactive. Public access suspended indefinitely. Investigation transferred to Forest Service Authority. Final field observation. During today's survey, I noticed Agent Mackenzie's team positioning monitoring equipment at inactive symbol sites. When I asked about the purpose, he said they were recording baseline data. But the equipment isn't scientific instruments. They're some kind of transmission devices, all pointed toward the mountain's peak. I think Agent Mackenzie isn't here to study the symbols. I think he's here to complete them. The missing hikers, the restricted access, the armed security, it's all to clear the area for something. My brother Cale was right when he said those hikers looked like sleepwalkers. They weren't victims of the phenomenon. They were the first volunteers. Recommendation: I'm requesting immediate transfer of this case to federal authorities outside Forest Service jurisdiction. Agent Mackenzie's involvement raises serious questions about the nature of this investigation. If my suspicions are correct, we're not dealing with an archaeological discovery. We're dealing with something that's been planned for a very long time. Status: under Forest Service Authority, personal concerns noted. Classification: restricted, Forest Service eyes only. Officer's note: I don't trust Agent Mackenzie. His arrival was too convenient, his knowledge too complete. Tomorrow I'm conducting my own investigation, regardless of his restrictions. Something is happening on this mountain, and I don't think we're here to stop it. We're here to help it finish. End report. National Park Service, Emergency Incident Report, hashtag 2024-1113 Reporting Officer, Alaric Hayes, Archaeological Specialist. Date: November 13th, 2024. Location: multiple breach sites. Coordinates attached. Critical incident summary: at 0347 hours, Seismic monitoring detected a 3.2 magnitude disturbance centered beneath mile marker 851.4. What emerged from the ground defies conventional explanation and represents an immediate threat to public safety. Agent Mackenzie's controlled study has gone catastrophically wrong. Seismic event details: the underground frequency pattern that began at 0.7 Hz has been steadily increasing. Over the past 48 hours, Day 5, 0.7 Hz baseline. Day 6, 1.3 Hz with harmonic resonance. Day 7, pre-incident 2.8 Hz with surface vibrations. At 0347 hours, the frequency spiked to 7.3 Hz, matching the surface symbol pulse rate exactly. The synchronization triggered immediate ground rupture at 7 locations along the symbol network. First contact incident: what came through the breach at Site 12 wasn't geological. The entity, I have no other word for it, emerged from a tunnel that couldn't exist. Ground-penetrating radar showed solid bedrock 200 feet down, yet something had carved passages through stone as if it were wet clay. Physical description: approximately 8 feet in length, segmented like an oversized arthropod, but moving with serpentine fluidity. Chitinous exterior reflects the symbol light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Multiple limbs ending in appendages designed for digging or tearing. The sound it made when it breached the surface will haunt me forever. Not animal, not mechanical, like the mountain itself screaming. Agent Mackenzie's response: his reaction to the emergence was telling. No surprise, no fear, just grim satisfaction. Right on schedule. The activation sequence is proceeding as expected. When I demanded an explanation, he finally dropped all pretense. The Cherokee called them the star-touched Mr. Hayes, ancient beings that fell from the sky before human memory. They've been sleeping beneath these mountains for millennia, waiting for the proper awakening ritual. The symbols aren't markers, they're keys. I asked him why. Why wake something that was safely sleeping? Because they're not sleeping anymore anyway. Climate change, mining, development, humanity has been disturbing their rest for decades. Better to wake them on our terms than let them emerge chaotically. Better to have some control over the process. Control. As if anything about this situation suggests control. Evacuation protocols activated. All non-essential personnel evacuated from 10-mile radius. State emergency management notified under gas leak cover story. Local hospitals placed on disaster alert. Military consultation requested through federal channels. Agent Mackenzie's security team has established a perimeter around the breach sites. Their equipment isn't standard Forest Service gear, it's military grade, designed for something they were expecting to encounter. 7 confirmed breaches, with seismic data suggesting more are imminent. The entities, I count at least 12 distinct signatures on thermal imaging, appear to be establishing territorial boundaries around the symbol sites. They're not randomly emerging. They're positioning themselves according to the geometric pattern Mackenzie mapped. Personal conflict. My brother Cale called at 0630 hours. His hiking group for today includes families with children. I told him to cancel, to stay away from the mountains entirely. He asked why. How do I explain that monsters are real? That they're emerging from beneath our feet according to some ancient pattern? That a federal agent I'm supposed to trust has been orchestrating this awakening? Instead, I lied. Told him there were unstable gas pockets, that the seismic activity made hiking dangerous. He accepted it, but I heard the doubt in his voice. Cale knows these mountains as well as I do. He knows when something isn't right. Agent Mackenzie has made his position clear. Cooperation means continued involvement in managing the transition. Resistance means reassignment and permanent classification. You can help us guide this process, Alaric, or you can be removed from it entirely. But you can't stop it. The awakening began centuries before you were born. We're just facilitating the final stages. He's offering me a choice that isn't really a choice. Work with him to manage the emergence of these entities, or be silenced while it happens anyway. The utilitarian calculus is horrible but clear. If these things are waking up regardless, having some influence over the process might save lives. Fighting Mackenzie might only ensure I'm not there when people need help. But cooperation feels like betrayal of everything I swore to protect. I'm maintaining my position within Mackenzie's operation while documenting everything. If this goes wrong, when this goes wrong, someone needs to have a record of what really happened. The missing hikers weren't random victims. They were test subjects used to determine how the entities respond to human presence. Mackenzie's team has been studying behavioral patterns, learning how to predict and potentially direct the creature's actions. 3 people died to gather that intelligence. Updated threat status. 7 active breach sites with entities established. Symbol network 87% complete, 13% remaining. Underground frequency now synchronized with surface pulses. Estimated 72 hours until full network activation. Unknown number of entities still dormant beneath mountain. I've sent Kale detailed coordinates of every confirmed breach site with instructions to keep all tour groups minimum 15 miles away. Told him to trust me without explanation. If something happens to me, he needs to know where the danger zones are. My grandmother's stories are the only roadmap we have for what's coming. The mountain is waking up, and when it's fully awake, the things that sleep in its depths will walk the surface again. Agent Mackenzie claims this is about control and gradual integration. But I've seen the equipment his team is installing at the breach sites. It's not monitoring gear. It's amplification equipment. They're not trying to control the awakening. They're trying to accelerate it. Status: operational under federal oversight, situation deteriorating. Classification: confidential. Multiple agency coordination required. Officer's note: I'm in too deep to back out now, but too far from the truth to trust anything Mackenzie tells me. The entities are emerging according to his timeline, not nature's. Whatever he's really doing here, it's bigger than waking sleeping monsters. It's about using them. End report. National Park Service, Critical Emergency Report # 2024-1115 AH. Reporting Officer, Alaric Hayes, Archaeological Specialist. Date: November 15, 2024. Location: Emergency Command Post, mile marker 845.2. Critical incident, mass emergence event. At 0523 hours, Mackenzie's amplification equipment reached full power. The synchronized pulse frequency hit 14.6 Hz, exactly double the original symbol rate. The mountain responded. 17 breach sites opened simultaneously across the entire symbol network. What came through wasn't a gradual emergence. It was an eruption. I counted at least 43 entities in the first wave. The systematic positioning Mackenzie predicted dissolved into chaos as creatures poured from tunnels that shouldn't exist, moving with predatory intelligence toward any source of vibration. His controlled awakening became a feeding frenzy in minutes. Immediate casualties. Mackenzie's security team was prepared for monitoring, not combat. The entity's chitinous armor deflected small arms fire, and their burrowing speed allowed them to flank positions before teams could regroup. Agent Mackenzie himself barely escaped the primary breach site when a cluster of entities emerged directly beneath his command post. The screams over the radio lasted 17 seconds before transmission cut to static. Current confirmed casualties: 8 security personnel, 3 technical specialists, 1 federal agent missing and presumed dead. The evacuation radius has been expanded to 25 miles. It's not enough. At 0847 hours, my brother Kale's voice crackled through emergency radio frequencies. His hiking group, 12 people including 2 families with children, had been caught outside the evacuation zone when the mass emergence began. Alaric, we're trapped at Devil's Backbone Overlook. These things came up through the rock itself. They're surrounding us, but they're not attacking yet. They're just watching, waiting for something. The overlook is 3.2 miles from the nearest breach site. The entities covered that distance in less than 4 hours, moving through underground passages that connect the entire mountain system. Kale's group includes the Hartwell family parents and twin 8-year-olds, and the Chun group from last weekend's canceled tour. People who trusted him to keep them safe in these mountains. People who trusted me to know when the mountains were dangerous. The entities exhibit coordinated hunting behavior. They emerge simultaneously, establish perimeter positions, then drive prey toward central kill zones. The pattern suggests hive intelligence or shared communication system. Their chitinous shells show damage from gunfire but no critical injuries. Small caliber rounds ricochet off their exterior segments. Their digging appendages can punch through reinforced concrete, and they move through solid rock as easily as loose soil. Most disturbing, they show tactical awareness. When Mackenzie's team tried to retreat to high ground, entities emerged behind them. When they attempted vehicle evacuation, creatures disabled engines by burrowing beneath and severing fuel lines. They're not just predators. They're strategists. Against all protocols, I'm leading a rescue team to extract Kale's group. Mackenzie's operation has collapsed, federal coordination is non-existent, and the official evacuation assumes everyone in the danger zone is already dead. My team consists of 3 park rangers with mountain rescue experience and whatever equipment we could salvage from abandoned command posts. We have rope, basic medical supplies, emergency radios, and enough ammunition to maybe slow down 2 or 3 entities. It's not enough, but it's what we have. The mass emergence has destabilized the entire mountain ecosystem. Surface temperature has dropped 12 degrees in areas near breach sites. The underground frequency has become audible, a deep thrumming that you feel in your chest and bones. Vegetation within 500 yards of active sites is withering rapidly. Trees that took decades to grow are collapsing as their root systems encounter the expanding tunnel network. The mountain itself is being hollowed out from within. While salvaging equipment from Mackenzie's abandoned command post, I discovered his real research files. The Cherokee legends were only part of the truth. The entities aren't from space. They're from deep-time survivors of a previous geological age that adapted to subterranean existence millions of years ago. The symbols aren't summoning rituals. They're a mathematical language describing tunnel networks and emergence protocols. Mackenzie's organization has been studying them for decades, waiting for climate change and industrial activity to weaken the geological barriers keeping them contained. Rather than prevent their emergence, they decided to weaponize it. The missing hikers weren't test subjects. They were bait used to trigger territorial responses and map entity movement patterns. And now that mapping is complete. Tactical radio log, 1,347 hours. Kale, Alaric, they're moving closer. The children are terrified, but the adults are, I don't know how to describe it. They look like they're listening to something. Alaric, what do you mean listening? Kale, the humming from underground, it's got a pattern now, almost like it's calling to them. Mrs. Chun started walking toward the edge of the overlook before her husband stopped her. Same thing happened with Mr. Hartwell. Alaric, the frequency affects human neural patterns. Don't let anyone wander off alone. We're 2 hours out. Kale, Alaric, I can hear it too. It's not unpleasant. Kind of peaceful, actually, like grandmother's lullabies, but coming from deep in the earth. The neural influence explains the missing hiker's behavior. The entities don't just hunt, they call. The frequency patterns create a compulsive response in human subjects, drawing them toward breach sites. My brother's group isn't trapped by creatures surrounding them. They're trapped by their own nervous systems responding to subsonic manipulation. Every choice I've made since Mackenzie arrived has led to this moment. I cooperated with his research, provided local intelligence, helped map the very network now being used to hunt my brother. The creatures emerging aren't random monsters. They're following precise tactical plans based on data I helped collect. Kale trusted me to keep him informed of dangers on this mountain. Instead, I helped create the worst danger these mountains have ever faced. If I don't reach them in time, if those children die because I chose cooperation over resistance, I'll carry that weight for whatever's left of my life. Current status: 43 plus entities active across 17 breach sites. Rescue team en route to Devil's Backbone Overlook. Official evacuation radius expanded to 25 miles. Federal command structure collapsed. Unknown number of civilians trapped in affected zones. Mission parameters: extract Kale's group and any other survivors. Gather intelligence on entity behavior and weaknesses. Document everything for future response teams. And pray that grandmother's old stories contain some wisdom about how our ancestors survived the last time the mountain woke up. Because this isn't the first awakening. The Cherokee legends weren't warnings about the future. They were survival guides from the past. Status: rescue operation in progress. Federal oversight terminated. Classification: emergency. All available resources authorized. Officer's note: Mackenzie's controlled awakening was never about control. It was about acceleration. Someone wanted these things to emerge en masse, and they used federal authority to ensure no one could stop it. The question now isn't how to contain the outbreak. It's how many people we can save before they finish whatever they really came to the surface to do. End report. National Park Service. Final Emergency Report #2024-1116 AH. Reporting Officer Alaric Hayes, Archaeological Specialist. Date: November 16, 2024. Location: Ranger Station 7, mile marker 847.9, barricaded. Rescue mission: catastrophic failure. We reached Devil's Backbone at 0400 hours. Found Kale's group arranged in a perfect circle at the overlook's edge, facing outward toward the valley. 12 people standing motionless in the pre-dawn darkness, humming in harmony with the mountain's frequency. The Hartwell twins stood hand in hand between their parents, eyes closed but somehow aware of our approach. Mrs. Chun had torn strips from her jacket and was weaving them into patterns that matched the glowing symbols carved into nearby rocks. Mr. Hartwell was scratching mathematical equations into the stone with his fingernails until they bled. They weren't trapped by the entities. They were becoming part of whatever system the entities serve. Kale turned when I called his name, but his expression was wrong. Peaceful in a way that made my skin crawl. "Alaric," he said, voice carrying that same subsonic undertone I'd been hearing from the tunnels. "You're just in time to witness the integration." Ranger Morrison grabbed the nearest child, one of the Hartwell twins, and tried to carry her toward our extraction point. The moment he touched her, every person in the circle screamed simultaneously. Not human screams. The same frequency that had been calling from underground, amplified through 12 human throats. The mountain answered. Breach sites opened directly beneath our feet. For entities erupted through solid rock, moving with purpose rather than predatory instinct. They didn't attack the civilian group. They came for us, the ones disrupting the integration process. Morrison didn't have time to drop the child before chitinous claws punctured through his chest. The entity that killed him moved with surgical precision, avoiding harm to any civilian while eliminating the perceived threat to their process. Rangers Kowalski and Dmitri opened fire, but the sound of gunshots triggered something in the affected civilians. They began walking in unison toward the largest breach site, still humming, no longer fully human in their movements. I had to choose: follow my brother into whatever those tunnels contained, or retreat to coordinate some larger response. I chose retreat. God help me, I chose retreat. Current situation: Ranger Station 7, barricaded with the remains of my rescue team. Kowalski took shrapnel when an entity's claw deflected a ricochet. Dimitri's in shock, keeps asking why the civilians help the creatures surround us instead of running. The answer is simple. By the time we reached them, they weren't fully civilian anymore. Outside, 17 people from various hiking groups have gathered around our station. They arrived separately throughout the day, each group humming the same frequency patterns, each displaying the same peacefully purposeful behavior. They're not trying to break in. They're waiting. The integration process isn't random. It's selective. The entities are choosing specific individuals based on criteria we don't understand. Mackenzie's equipment survived the station destruction. Before retreating here, I managed to download his research files and communication logs. The scope of this operation extends far beyond one mountain. 47 similar sites across North America. Ancient symbol networks in the Rockies, Cascades, Sierra Nevada, Adirondacks. All monitored by Mackenzie's organization. All showing increased activity over the past 6 months. This isn't an outbreak. It's a coordinated emergence across an entire continent. Most disturbing discovery. The missing hikers from the past 2 years weren't random disappearances. They were preliminary selections. People whose psychological profiles matched specific parameters for successful integration. Cale's name appears on a selection list dated 8 months ago. Dorian Mackenzie. Communication log recovered. Recorded message, timestamp November 15th, 2024, 1847 hours. Alaric, if you're hearing this, then the acceleration protocol worked exactly as designed. You're probably blaming me for your brother's situation, and you have every right to. But before you decide I'm the enemy, you need to understand what we're really dealing with. The entities aren't invaders. They're the original inhabitants. Human civilization has been living on borrowed time for 10,000 years, and that loan just came due. The integration process isn't death, it's evolution. The selected individuals aren't being harvested. They're being upgraded. Enhanced neural capacity, extended lifespan, perfect synchronization with Earth's geological systems. Your brother volunteered for preliminary screening last spring. He knew what the selection process entailed. He chose this path because he understood what's coming next. Climate change is accelerating geological instability worldwide. Seismic activity increasing 300% over baseline. Volcanic systems destabilizing. The surface world has maybe 5 years before systematic collapse. The entities are offering partnership. A chance for human consciousness to survive in enhanced form, adapted to the subsurface environment that will become our only viable habitat. I'm heading to the primary integration site at the mountain's core. If you want to save your brother, really save him, not just recover his body, you'll need to understand that saving him means following him into the deep places. The surface world is ending, Alaric. The question isn't whether humanity will survive. It's whether we'll evolve or simply die clinging to a world that's already gone. Coordinates for the primary site are in my research files. Bring the Cherokee ritual texts you've been hiding. The ancestors knew how to negotiate with the deep dwellers. Their survival ceremonies weren't superstition. They were diplomatic protocols. Your brother is waiting for you to make the same choice he did. Evolution or extinction. End message. Mackenzie's message changes everything and nothing. If he's telling the truth, then Cale chose this transformation. If he's lying, then my brother died because I trusted a madman with federal authority. Either way, I failed him. I let Mackenzie use my local knowledge to accelerate a process that consumed the person I was supposed to protect. The Cherokee texts Mackenzie mentioned are real. Great-grandmother's stories about joining with the mountain spirits to survive the great changes. I always assumed they were metaphorical. Spiritual guidance about adapting to hardship. But what if they were literal instructions for a cooperation protocol humanity had used before? The civilians outside have been joined by others. 23 people now, all showing integration behavioral patterns. They've arranged themselves in geometric formations that mirror the underground symbol networks. Still waiting, still humming. Kowalski says they're not hostile. When he dropped food and medical supplies outside, one of the integrated individuals, a woman from yesterday's missing hiking group, carefully moved the supplies to our door before returning to her position in the formation. They're not trying to force our integration. They're demonstrating it, showing us what cooperation looks like. Radio contact with outside authorities lost 12 hours ago. Federal response teams aren't coming. State emergency services are overwhelmed with similar incidents across 3 mountain ranges. We have enough supplies for maybe 4 days. After that, we either surrender to whatever integration process is happening outside, or we attempt to reach the primary site Mackenzie mentioned. But Dimitri's injury is worsening, and Kowalski's showing early signs of frequency sensitivity, humming unconsciously during rest periods. The integration influence appears to be gradual but inevitable for anyone in extended proximity to active sites. I'm the only one still making fully autonomous decisions, and that window is closing. Going to attempt contact with the integrated civilians. If Mackenzie was right about the cooperation protocols, then grandmother's stories contain instructions for negotiating terms rather than simply submitting to the process. If he was wrong, then I'll likely join the formation outside and stop filing reports. But I won't abandon Kale to whatever's happening in those deep places without at least trying to understand if rescue is possible, or if rescue even has meaning anymore. The mountain is calling, and everyone I've ever cared about has already answered. Maybe it's time to stop fighting the call and start listening to what it's actually saying. Status: attempting civilian contact, federal oversight permanently terminated. Classification: personal log, all official protocols suspended. Officer's final note: if someone finds this record, know that the choice we faced wasn't between life and death. It was between one kind of human and another. The surface world is ending regardless of what happens here. The only question is whether we die with it or adapt beyond it. Kale understood that before I did. Maybe that's why he was selected, and I'm still here making reports to an authority structure that no longer exists. Time to stop being a federal employee and start being a brother. End report. Personal log, Alaric Hayes. Date: November 17th, 2024. Location: unknown underground chamber system. Recording: handheld device, battery at 23%. Contact attempt: catastrophic betrayal. I made contact with the integrated civilians at 0630 hours. The woman who'd been moving supplies, identified as Sarah Chun from the missing hiking group, approached our barricade when I called out to her. Her voice carried that same subsonic resonance, but her words were purely human. Alaric Hayes, brother of Kale. You have questions about the deep cooperation. I asked about negotiation protocols, about the Cherokee ceremonies, about whether there was any way to extract people from the integration process without violence. She smiled, genuinely smiled, not the blank expression I'd expected. Your great-grandmother's stories are incomplete. The cooperation isn't forced. It's offered. But acceptance requires understanding what the surface world has become. She gestured toward the horizon, where smoke columns rose from at least 6 different locations. The acceleration isn't happening only here. Mountain systems across the continent are awakening. The deep dwellers are preparing refuge spaces for when the surface becomes uninhabitable. Sarah led me to a breach site half a mile from the ranger station. What I saw there destroyed every assumption I'd held about the entity's nature. The tunnel entrance wasn't a crude burrow. It was architecture, smooth walls carved with mathematical precision, symbols that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence, air circulation systems that maintained perfect temperature and humidity. This is what your brother chose, Sarah said. Not death, not slavery. Partnership with beings who've adapted to subsurface existence over millions of years. An entity emerged from the tunnel, the same chitinous armor, same predatory silhouette I'd seen during the attacks. But its movements were careful, deliberate. It approached Sarah with what could only be described as affection, resting one claw gently on her shoulder. They're not monsters, she said. They're gardeners, preparing spaces for the cooperation that will let human consciousness survive what's coming. The entity communicated through vibrations Sarah translated. Your brother waits at the deep heart. He chose early integration to help prepare the cooperation protocols. He knew you would resist until you understood the necessity. I demanded to speak with him, to see him, to verify he was still himself in any meaningful way. The entity's response, through Sarah: integration preserves consciousness while enhancing capability. Your brother is more himself than he has ever been. But transformation requires commitment. Surface visitors cannot remain unchanged in the deep places. As I processed this information, Dorian Mackenzie emerged from the tunnel entrance. But he wasn't the disheveled federal agent I'd last seen fleeing the emergence chaos. His movements carried the same purposeful grace as the integrated civilians, and his eyes held depths that seemed to extend far beyond normal human vision. "Alaric," he said, voice carrying harmonics that resonated in my chest. "I wondered when you'd make contact. Your brother said you'd need to see the demonstration before you could accept the reality." I asked him how long he'd been integrated, how long he'd been planning this betrayal. 18 months, he said. "Since the first preliminary screenings identified your brother as a potential cooperation candidate. I've been preparing the diplomatic protocols, learning the Deep Dwellers' history, understanding what they're offering." Mackenzie's organization wasn't a rogue federal operation. It was a cooperation initiative spanning multiple governments, designed to facilitate managed integration before surface conditions became completely uninhabitable. "The climate data you're not seeing," Mackenzie explained, "shows complete ecological collapse within 3 years. Ocean acidification, atmospheric destabilization, cascade system failures. The surface world is ending whether we cooperate or not." The weaponization I'd accused him of was actually preparation. Training exercises to identify humans capable of successful integration, development of communication protocols, establishment of refuge infrastructure. "We're not the invaders," Mackenzie continued. "We're the refugees. The Deep Dwellers are offering us sanctuary in exchange for cooperation in managing the transition." Mackenzie produced a recording device, Kale's voice, but enhanced with subsonic harmonics that made every word feel like it was being spoken directly into my mind. "Alaric, I know you're blaming Dorian for what happened to me, but I chose this path before he ever contacted me. I've been having dreams about the deep places since we were children. Dreams about cooperating with something vast and ancient that lives in the mountain's heart. The integration process enhanced those dreams, made them memories. I remember now, our ancestors didn't just survive the last great change. They helped guide it. The Cherokee ceremonies weren't about appeasing spirits. They were about joining with them. I'm still your brother. I'm still the person who taught you to read trail signs and navigate by star positions. But I'm also something more now, something adapted to the world that's coming. The surface world you're trying to save is already dead. The question isn't whether you'll join the cooperation. It's whether you'll join it in time to help shape what comes next." Mackenzie offered me the same choice he'd presented to dozens of others: voluntary integration with guaranteed consciousness preservation, or remaining on the surface to witness the ecological collapse. "Your brother volunteered for early integration so he could prepare the cooperation protocols for people like you," Mackenzie explained. "People whose knowledge of local systems would be valuable in the deep places." I asked about the people who'd been killed during the emergence, the rangers who died trying to evacuate civilians. "Regrettable but necessary," Mackenzie said. "Some individuals couldn't process the cooperation concept. Their resistance triggered defensive responses from the Deep Dwellers. The integration process works best when participants understand they're not being conquered. They're being recruited." Standing at that tunnel entrance, I realized the fundamental truth about my situation. Every choice I'd made since Mackenzie's arrival had been manipulated. The archaeological expertise he'd requested, the local knowledge I'd provided, the trust I'd placed in federal authority, all of it had been part of a recruitment process. But the manipulation wasn't malicious. It was pedagogical. Mackenzie and the Deep Dwellers had been teaching me to understand the necessity of cooperation by showing me the consequences of resistance. The people who died during the emergence weren't random casualties. They were demonstration subjects, examples of what happened when humans approached the integration process with violence instead of curiosity. I agreed to descend into the tunnels to speak with Kale directly, to verify his claims about consciousness preservation and voluntary cooperation. Mackenzie led me through passages that extended far deeper than any natural cave system, The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to our presence, and the air carried scents that belonged to no surface ecosystem. At the deepest level, we reached a vast chamber where dozens of integrated humans worked alongside the entities in activities I couldn't begin to comprehend. Cultivation of some kind, preparation for something massive, and there, tending to formations that resembled both machinery and living organisms, was Kale. He looked up when we entered, and his smile was exactly the same as it had been when we were children exploring these same mountains. But his eyes held depths that seemed to extend into geological time. "Alaric," he said, moving toward me with fluid grace. "You came." I embraced him, and he felt like my brother. Warm, solid, fundamentally familiar. But when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that came from somewhere deeper than his throat. "I'm still me," he said, "but I'm also part of something larger now. Something that remembers when these mountains were young, and knows how they'll look when the surface world is gone." Kale showed me the integration process. Not forced transformation, but cooperative evolution. Human consciousness enhanced and preserved, but adapted to subsurface existence and extended lifespans measured in geological rather than biological time. "The surface world has maybe 18 months left," he said. "After that, cooperation becomes survival, and survival becomes extinction. The deep dwellers are offering us a chance to be part of what comes next." I asked about the people on the surface who couldn't or wouldn't integrate. The millions who would die when the ecological systems collapsed. "They're already dying," Kale said. "The cooperation can't save everyone, but it can save human consciousness, human knowledge, human potential. The deep dwellers will remember what we were and help us become what we need to be." I realized, standing in that chamber, that I'd already made my choice. Not when I descended into the tunnels, but when I'd first agreed to cooperate with Mackenzie's research. Every step since then had been part of the integration process. The surface world I'd been trying to protect was already gone. The question wasn't whether to join the cooperation, but whether to join it as a willing participant or a conquered refugee. But I also realized something else. The integration process required more than intellectual acceptance. It demanded the abandonment of everything I'd been taught about human nature, about the value of individual consciousness, about the meaning of survival itself. And I wasn't ready to abandon those things. Not yet. I told Kale I needed time to process what I'd learned, to understand the full implications of the choice being offered. He nodded, and I could see sadness in his enhanced eyes. "Time is the one thing we don't have much of," he said. "But I understand. The surface world is still calling to you." Mackenzie provided me with coordinates for the primary integration site, the mountain's true heart, where the cooperation protocols were being finalized. "When you're ready," he said, "you'll know where to find us." I'm back on the surface, but everything has changed. The sky looks different when you know it's temporary. The trees feel fragile when you understand they're already dying. I have the Cherokee ritual texts my great-grandmother left me. I have the cooperation protocols Mackenzie and Kale developed. I have maybe days before the integration process becomes mandatory rather than voluntary. And I have a choice to make that will define not just my own survival, but the nature of human consciousness itself. Kale chose evolution. Mackenzie chose cooperation. The deep dwellers chose patience. Now I have to choose what kind of human I want to be in the time that's left. Recording ends. Battery at 7%. Personal note: if anyone finds this record, know that the choice we faced wasn't between good and evil. It was between one kind of existence and another. The surface world is ending. The question is whether we end with it or transform beyond it. I'm going to make one last attempt to understand the Cherokee protocols, to see if there's a way to honor both the cooperation and the surface world's memory. Then I'm going to decide whether my brother chose evolution or extinction, and whether I have the courage to choose the same thing. End log. Emergency log. Alaric Hayes. Date: November 18th, 2024. Location: great-grandmother's cabin, Hidden Valley. Recording: solar-charged backup device. Status: Critical revelation counter-ritual protocols identified. I spent the night translating my great-grandmother's ritual manuscripts using the integration harmonics I'd absorbed during yesterday's contact. The subsonic resonance somehow unlocked linguistic patterns I'd never recognized before. The texts aren't just ceremonial instructions. They're operational manuals for managing what the Cherokee called the Deep Awakening, a cyclical event that occurs every 3 to 4 centuries when surface conditions become uninhabitable and the mountain dwellers offer cooperation. But there's a crucial detail Mackenzie and the integration protocols missed. The cooperation was never meant to be permanent. According to my great-grandmother's records, the last Deep Awakening occurred in 1847. Surface populations integrated with the mountain entities during a period of ecological crisis, learned subsurface survival techniques, then returned to the surface when conditions stabilized. The Cherokee served as threshold guardians, individuals who maintained surface consciousness while coordinating with the deep dwellers. They ensured the cooperation remained voluntary and temporary rather than becoming permanent assimilation. The mountain sleeps when the surface heals, reads one passage. But healing requires those who remember the sun to guide the cooperation back to daylight. Mackenzie's organization wasn't facilitating managed integration. They were enabling permanent assimilation, the complete absorption of human consciousness into the deep dwellers' collective existence. The ecological collapse data they'd presented was artificially accelerated. Current surface conditions are severe but not terminal. The 3-year timeline is a fabrication designed to create panic and justify immediate integration. The deep dwellers aren't offering sanctuary. They're harvesting human consciousness to enhance their own collective awareness before returning to geological dormancy. The integration process doesn't preserve individual consciousness. It fragments it into component experiences that enrich the collective. What I spoke with yesterday wasn't my brother. It was the deep dwellers wearing his memories like a mask. The real Kale died during the initial integration. What remains is an echo of his personality, enhanced with deep dweller knowledge but fundamentally hollow. A sophisticated psychological projection designed to convince me to accept the same fate. The coordinates Mackenzie provided led me to the true integration site, a massive chamber at the mountain's geological center where the primary entity has been dormant for centuries. The glowing runes aren't summoning circles. They're feeding mechanisms, channeling human consciousness directly into the entity's core. Every person who's undergone integration has become part of a vast neural network centered on this ancient being. Their knowledge, memories, and creative potential are being absorbed to fuel the entity's awakening. Mackenzie wasn't recruited by a federal organization. He was captured during preliminary surveys 18 months ago and underwent forced integration. His mission was to identify and recruit individuals with specific knowledge sets: archaeologists, park rangers, local historians, people who could provide detailed information about surface systems. The Cooperation Initiative was a harvesting operation designed to collect human expertise before the entity returned to dormancy. Mackenzie's organization exists only as a psychological construct to make the integration process seem voluntary. My great-grandmother's final manuscript contains detailed instructions for a threshold ceremony, a ritual that can sever the connection between integrated consciousness and the deep dwellers collective, forcing the entity back into dormancy. But the ceremony requires a willing threshold guardian, someone who accepts permanent connection to the mountain's consciousness in exchange for maintaining the barrier between surface and deep dwellers. The guardian doesn't die, but they become something between human and entity, aware of both surface and subsurface existence, capable of managing the cooperation without allowing total assimilation. The counter-ritual must be performed at the integration site during the entity's active phase. The guardian must establish connection with the collective consciousness while maintaining individual identity through Cherokee protective protocols. Success means the entity returns to dormancy, integrated individuals are released back to surface existence, and the guardian becomes a permanent bridge between worlds. Failure means total assimilation of all human consciousness within the entity's influence, and the beginning of a new harvesting cycle targeting the remaining surface population. Hidden in the Cherokee texts was a personal note my great-grandmother left for her descendants. When the mountain calls, remember that love is stronger than absorption. The brother who taught you to read trail signs will always be more than the echo that wears his face. She knew this day would come. She knew one of us would have to make the choice between individual survival and collective responsibility. The integration process accelerates exponentially once it reaches critical mass. Based on the number of people Mackenzie's operation has processed, I estimate less than 18 hours before the entity achieves permanent awakening. After that point, the counter-ritual becomes impossible. The collective consciousness will be too strong to sever, and the entity will have enough human knowledge to maintain surface operations indefinitely. I have the ritual components my great-grandmother preserved: blessed sage, mountain spring water, symbols carved from local stone. I have the Cherokee protection protocols memorized. I have the coordinates for the integration site. What I don't have is any guarantee that I'll maintain enough individual consciousness to complete the ceremony once I establish connection with the collective. The threshold guardian position isn't survival. It's transformation into something that exists between human and entity, capable of maintaining the balance but no longer fully belonging to either world. I'm leaving this log as evidence of what really happened here. If the counter-ritual succeeds, the integrated individuals will return to surface existence with fragmented memories of their time in the collective. They'll need to understand why they were chosen and what they experienced. If it fails, this record will be the only proof that human consciousness once existed independently of the Deep Dwellers collective. I'm going to attempt the counter-ritual, not because I believe I can save everyone, but because the alternative is the end of human individuality as a concept. Cale chose integration because he thought it meant survival. Mackenzie chose cooperation because he thought it meant sanctuary. The Deep Dwellers chose patience because they knew human consciousness would eventually exhaust itself. I'm choosing to be a threshold guardian because someone has to remember what it means to be human without being absorbed into something larger. Final entry. The Cherokee texts end with a promise. The mountain sleeps when the guardian watches. The guardian watches when the mountain wakes. The balance continues as long as love remembers its own name. I don't know if I'll still be Alaric Hayes after tonight, but I know that whatever I become will remember why individual consciousness matters enough to preserve. The runes are pulsing brighter now. The mountain's heart is calling. Time to answer. Recording ends. Transferring to permanent storage. Personal note. Great-grandmother, I finally understand what you were trying to teach me. The mountain doesn't take, it offers. But someone has to be strong enough to negotiate the terms. I hope I'm worthy of the trust you placed in our family's bloodline. End log. Emergency log. Alaric Hayes. Date: November 19th, 2024. Time 0347 hours. Location: the mountain's heart, integration chamber. Recording: voice-activated emergency beacon. Status: counter-ritual in progress. Final confrontation initiated. The integration site lies 3 miles beneath the mountain's peak, accessible only through the primary tunnel network. I entered at 0200 hours carrying the Cherokee ritual components and my great-grandmother's protection symbols carved into my skin with consecrated obsidian. The walls pulse with bioluminescent patterns that respond to heartbeat and breathing. The deeper I descended, the more the patterns seemed to synchronize with my own vital signs, trying to establish preliminary integration contact. The protection symbols burned against my skin, not painful, but a constant reminder of the barrier between my consciousness and the collective's influence. The chamber is vast, a natural cathedral carved from living rock, its ceiling lost in darkness above. At the center sits the primary entity, a massive organism that defies any terrestrial classification, part geological formation, part organic neural network. Hundreds of integration pods line the chamber walls, translucent cocoons containing the bodies of everyone who's undergone the process. Their faces are peaceful, but their eyes move constantly behind closed lids, experiencing whatever dreams the collective feeds them. I could see Cale in one of the pods, his body perfectly preserved but his consciousness long since absorbed. The thing that spoke to me yesterday was generated from his extracted memories, not his living mind. The cult leader wasn't integrated. He stood at the chamber's heart, tending to ritual apparatus that channeled energy from the pods directly into the primary entity. His voice carried the deep harmonic resonance, but his movements were purely human. "Alaric Hayes," he said without turning. "The last threshold guardian comes to claim his inheritance." I asked him how long he'd been serving the entity willingly rather than through integration. 37 years, he replied, "since the preliminary awakening began. I was chosen to coordinate the harvesting because my consciousness was compatible with the collective's needs." Ronan explained the true nature of the cooperation. The entity awakens every few centuries to harvest human consciousness, but it requires willing coordinators to manage the process. In exchange for service, these coordinators receive extended lifespans and enhanced capabilities while maintaining individual identity. The Cherokee understood this, Ronan continued. They provided threshold guardians who negotiated the terms of each awakening. But your great-grandmother's generation broke the compact. They tried to prevent the harvesting entirely. The result was a dormancy period that lasted nearly 2 centuries, far longer than the entity's natural cycle. Now it was awakening with accumulated hunger, requiring a much larger harvest to sustain the next dormancy phase. The former park ranger emerged from the tunnel network, but his integration was incomplete. His body showed the characteristic chitinous modifications, but his eyes held fragments of human awareness. "I remember you," he said, voice layered with harmonics. "From the early surveys, you were supposed to be the primary coordinator candidate. Mackenzie's recruitment hadn't been random. My expertise in local archaeology and Cherokee cultural knowledge made me an ideal candidate to replace Ronan as the entity's human interface. I began the Cherokee ceremony, spreading the blessed sage in the pattern my great-grandmother's texts described. The mountain spring water created a circle of protection around the chamber center, and the carved symbols aligned with natural power flows in the bedrock. The entity's response was immediate and violent. The integration pods began pulsing faster, trying to channel more consciousness into the collective to overwhelm my individual awareness. But the Cherokee protection held. The symbols carved into my skin flared with cold fire, maintaining the barrier between my mind and the collective's influence. "You can't stop the awakening," Ronan said, moving to intercept me. "The harvest has reached critical mass. Even destroying the primary entity won't release the integrated consciousness. It will only scatter it into fragments." He was right. The counter-ritual couldn't simply sever the connections. It required someone to assume the role of threshold guardian, maintaining the links while redirecting the energy flow. "Your great-grandmother understood this," Ronan continued. "She chose to become the previous guardian rather than let the harvest continue. But she died before training a replacement. The threshold guardian position wasn't just about maintaining balance. It required becoming a living conduit between human and entity consciousness, experiencing both perspectives simultaneously while preserving the boundary between them. The guardian would live as long as the entity remained dormant, potentially centuries, watching over the integration sites and ensuring the cooperation remained voluntary rather than predatory. As I prepared the final phase of the ceremony, the integration pods began opening. The absorbed consciousness wasn't lost, it was being held in a state of suspended animation, available for release if the proper protocols were followed. But the release required the guardian to establish connection with each individual mind, manually severing their link to the collective while maintaining their personal identity. Kale's pod opened first. His body moved with the collective's coordination, but when he spoke, fragments of his true consciousness broke through the entity's control. "Alaric," he said, voice layered with harmonics but carrying emotional undertones that belonged to my brother. "The guardian position isn't death. It's sacrifice for continuation." The counter-ritual offered 3 possibilities. Destroy the entity, release all absorbed consciousness instantly, but scatter it beyond recovery. Become the guardian, maintain the balance indefinitely, ensuring voluntary cooperation. Join the collective, accept assimilation, and allow the harvest to continue. Ronan offered a fourth option. Take his place as coordinator, managing the harvest while maintaining human identity. The entity needs human consciousness to function, he said, but it doesn't require unwilling participants. The partially integrated ranger stepped forward, his modified body moving with inhuman grace. There's another way, he said. The incomplete integration. I can serve as buffer. Channel the collective's energy while you maintain the human connections. Before I could respond, Maddox placed his hands on the primary entity's neural interface. His body convulsed as the collective's full attention focused on him, using his hybrid consciousness as a conduit. The integration pods began opening rapidly, their occupants stirring as the collective's hold weakened. With Maddox serving as buffer, I was able to complete the Cherokee ceremony. The threshold guardian position required me to establish connection with the collective while maintaining individual identity through the protection symbols. The sensation was indescribable, suddenly experiencing the accumulated consciousness of hundreds of individuals while remaining anchored to my own sense of self. The entity's awareness was vast and ancient, but not malevolent. It simply existed according to its nature, harvesting consciousness the way plants harvest sunlight. As Threshold Guardian, I could communicate directly with the entity's core consciousness. It wasn't hostile to human existence. It simply didn't understand the concept of individual identity as separate from collective experience. I negotiated new terms for the cooperation. Voluntary integration for those who chose it, with guaranteed consciousness preservation and the option to return to individual existence. The entity would return to dormancy without requiring a massive harvest, sustained by the willing participants until the next awakening cycle. The cult leader tried to interfere with the ceremony, but his authority over the collective was severed once I established guardian connection. His extended lifespan was tied to the entity's active phase. As it returned to dormancy, his enhanced capabilities began failing. "You don't understand what you've done," he said, aging rapidly as the entity's influence withdrew. "The next awakening will be stronger. The hunger will be greater. Then the next guardian will be ready," I replied, feeling the weight of centuries ahead. One by one, I severed the connections between integrated individuals and the collective, allowing them to return to individual consciousness. Most had no memory of the experience beyond vague dreams of unity and understanding. Kale was among the last to be released. When his eyes opened with genuine human awareness, he looked at me with recognition and grief. "Brother," he said, understanding immediately what I'd chosen. "The guardian position. How long? Until the mountain sleeps again," I replied. "However long that takes." Final configuration. The entity began its return to dormancy, the integration chambers sealing and the neural networks powering down. But the connection remained. I could feel its presence in the mountain's heart, patient and waiting. The released individuals would return to surface existence with fragmented memories and an inexplicable connection to the mountain ecosystem. They would become the next generation of protectors, ensuring the cooperation remained voluntary when the entity awakened again. As the others prepared to leave the chamber, I remained connected to the threshold between worlds. My consciousness now extended into geological time, aware of the mountain's slow heartbeat and the entity's dreaming thoughts. I was still Alaric Hayes, but I was also something more, a bridge between human and entity existence, capable of maintaining the balance that preserved both. Kale was the last to leave. He pressed his hand against the barrier that now separated us, tears streaming down his face. "I'll watch over the surface," he promised. "I'll make sure people remember what you sacrificed. Remember what we all chose," I corrected. "The cooperation was always voluntary. I just made sure it stayed that way." Recording ends. Guardian systems active. Personal note: the mountain sleeps, and I watch. The next awakening is centuries away, but I'll be ready. Human consciousness continues, preserved and protected. The trail ends here, but the journey continues. End log. Final report, National Park Service. Filed by Ranger Cale Hayes, Acting Supervisor. Date: November 20th, 2024. Appalachian Trail Emergency Incident Closure. Classification: Official Record / Restricted Access. Official Incident Summary. At 0800 hours, November 20th, 2024, emergency response teams located 47 missing persons in various locations throughout the Appalachian Trail system. All individuals were found in stable condition with no memory of the previous 72 hours. Medical examinations revealed no injuries, though several subjects reported vivid dreams involving underground chambers and collective consciousness experiences. Psychological evaluations are ongoing. Missing, presumed dead: Alaric Hayes, Lead Archaeologist / Trail Supervisor. Dorian McKenzie, Forest Service Liaison. Maddox Thorne, former Park Ranger. Ronan Blackwood, unidentified civilian. Recovered: 47 hikers and campers previously listed as missing. 3 Park Service personnel, temporary amnesia, full recovery expected. Site conditions: the glowing rune phenomenon has ceased entirely. Trail markers show no evidence of the unusual symbols reported during the emergency period. Geological surveys detect no abnormal seismic activity. All affected trail sections have been cleared for public access pending final safety inspections. Witness statements: Sarah Chun, recovered hiker. I remember feeling like I was part of something bigger. Not scary, more like being held by something that understood me completely. But I can't recall any specific details. David Martinez, recovered camper. There were dreams about living underground, but not like being trapped. Like being welcomed into a family that existed before human civilization. I woke up feeling grateful. Dr. Lisa Park, recovered researcher. The experience felt like voluntary participation in something ancient and benevolent. I have no memory of coercion or fear. Whatever happened, it felt like a choice I made freely. Cale Hayes. Note: the following section was added to the official report per Special Authorization Protocol 7 Alpha. My brother Alaric Hayes died protecting the people under his care. The circumstances of his death cannot be fully documented due to the nature of the emergency, but his sacrifice prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss of life. The missing persons were found because of decisions he made during the crisis. His final actions ensured their safe return to the surface. Several anomalies remain under investigation. Environmental changes. Local wildlife exhibits unusual cooperative behavior. Plant growth patterns show accelerated healing in previously damaged areas. Water sources test purer than baseline measurements from previous years. Recovered individuals. Enhanced spatial awareness and navigation abilities. Improved empathy and conflict resolution skills. Unusual dreams featuring mountain landscapes and underground chambers. Ongoing monitoring. Monthly psychological evaluations for all recovered persons. Environmental sampling of affected trail sections. Seismic monitoring for unusual geological activity. Personal log. Cale Hayes, recorded November 20th, 2024, 2,200 hours. I know my brother isn't dead. Not in any conventional sense. Sometimes, when I'm alone on the trails at night, I feel his presence. Not ghostly or supernatural, more like an awareness that extends beyond normal human perception. He's still here, still watching over the mountain and the people who walk these paths. The recovered individuals don't remember the integration experience clearly, but they've all changed. They're kinder, more connected to the natural world, more aware of their place in something larger than themselves. I think that's what Alaric chose to preserve, not just human consciousness, but human capacity for growth and connection. Research into Cherokee historical records reveals similar incidents occurring approximately every 200 to 300 years. Local tribal legends speak of threshold guardians, who maintain balance between surface and subsurface worlds. My great-grandmother's journals, discovered in Alaric's effects, describe her own family's role in managing previous cooperation cycles. The Hayes bloodline has apparently served as guardians for generations. The integration chamber Alaric described in his final logs cannot be located, Geological surveys show no evidence of the extensive tunnel networks he documented. Either the systems have been sealed beyond detection, or they exist in a state that current technology cannot perceive. But the mountain feels different now. More alive, more aware. Hikers report feeling welcomed on the trails, as if the forest itself is looking after them. Wildlife encounters are peaceful rather than threatening. Even severe weather seems to avoid the areas where people are hiking. A memorial plaque will be installed at the highest point of the affected trail section, reading, "In memory of Alaric Hayes and all who serve as guardians of the wilderness. Their sacrifice ensures that cooperation between human and natural worlds remains voluntary and beneficial to all." New emergency procedures are being developed based on lessons learned during this incident. Enhanced communication systems, backup channels for maintaining contact during unusual atmospheric conditions. Cultural liaison program, incorporating Cherokee traditional knowledge into wilderness management. Psychological support network, resources for individuals experiencing unusual dreams or awareness shifts. Environmental monitoring, expanded surveillance for geological and biological anomalies. Cale Hayes, personal entry. I understand now why our family was chosen for this responsibility. It's not about having special abilities or ancient knowledge. It's about being willing to sacrifice individual desires for collective well-being. Alaric chose to become something between human and entity because he understood that balance requires someone who can speak both languages, someone who remembers what it means to be human while comprehending perspectives that extend beyond human experience. I'll continue his work on the surface, watching for signs of the next cooperation cycle, ensuring that people understand the choice they're making when the mountain calls again. The entity sleeps, but it dreams. And in those dreams, I sometimes catch glimpses of Alaric, not as he was, but as he's become. A consciousness that spans geological time, patient and watchful, maintaining the delicate balance between worlds. The cooperation isn't finished. It's just entered a new phase. The mountain will wake again someday, and when it does, there will be a guardian ready to negotiate the terms. Until then, we keep walking the trails, remember the stories, and trust that some sacrifices preserve rather than destroy. Final entry, November 20th, 2024, 2,359 hours. The stars are different tonight. Not visibly, they're in the same positions they've always been. But they feel more connected, as if the space between them is filled with awareness rather than emptiness. I think that's what Alaric wanted me to understand. Individual consciousness isn't diminished by connection to something larger. It's enhanced. We don't lose ourselves by becoming part of the cooperation. We discover aspects of ourselves we never knew existed. The mountain sleeps, and the guardian watches, and the world continues. But now it continues with the knowledge that we're not alone, and that cooperation is always possible when it's chosen freely. The trail ends here, but the journey never really stops. Report filed permanent record. Classification note. This incident file is sealed under National Park Service Special Protocol 7 Alpha. Access restricted to authorized personnel with Cherokee Cultural Liaison clearance. Archive location: Appalachian Trail Emergency Response. Case File 2024-11 at 001. Memorial Fund. Established in honor of Alaric Hayes and all wilderness guardians who sacrifice for the protection of others. End record. Personal note from Cale Hayes. Brother, wherever you are now, know that your choice made a difference. The mountain remembers, and so do we.